Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to 1.5 million new homes, the local government challenge, sponsored by Loft and by Hadley Property Group. My name is Toby Fox. Now, the government is on a mission to get 1.5 million new homes built. And the key delivery arm for that national ambition is local government, whether it's the planning authority or the joint venture partner with the private sector, or directly delivering new homes. So I've been visiting a different council every month to ask what works and what needs to change to enable them to deliver more homes. And this month I've been in Hounslow in West London, posting a number of video interviews and podcasts throughout February. And in this session today, we're going to dig into an issue that was raised by those interviews and picked up on by a viewer, Leanne Tritton of Ing Media, who asked us to consider the question of whether to retrofit existing homes to improve them or to demolish and replace them. So that's for the second half of this session today. First, we're going to open today's session with the immediate challenges of all the issues facing our guest council this month. What's at the very top of their in tray? So let's meet our guests and find out by welcoming in alphabetical order Tom Conlon, who is Development Director at Loft, Nicola Mathers, who is Chief Executive at Future of London, Peter O'Brien, who's Director of Regeneration and Growth at the London Borough of Hounslow, and Dominic Spray, Director of Sustainability and Innovation at Hadley Property Group. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And Peter, let's kick off. What's at the top of your in tray? It's pretty full.
Yeah, it's there's a lot going on at the moment in the industry, isn't there? And a lot of us are busy polishing off those crystal balls to see what the future might hold. So I guess there's a couple of things that are on my mind at the moment, and I suspect many of us in the industry will recognize these. One is broad-based viability. It's very difficult to make anything happen at the moment, be it affordable housing or market housing in large parts of the country, and there are quite a long list of things that make that the case that many of us are familiar with in terms of just the cost of materials, the cost of getting stuff built, and a lot of other related factors in terms of the economy and where it finds itself at the moment. It's pretty flat at the moment. People don't have as much money in their pockets. Interest rates are higher than they used to be. All of that is making it difficult for the market to just do its thing. The next kind of bit that's on my mind is money specifically for affordable housing, and the landscape for that has been particularly challenging, be that for councils and housing revenue accounts, which is how we pay for all of that sort of stuff, are in really, really difficult space at the moment, as that with a similar situation existing for housing associations. So what that means is that if you're a developer looking to go out and build some homes at the moment, you're finding it very difficult to find your affordable housing partner to join you in that journey because, frankly, no one has any cash. So that is making it really, really difficult to deliver affordable homes, and that's having a knock-on effect on wider delivery. The other thing that I get a lot of emails about at the moment is regulation. Now, if you listened to, I guess, the national press talking about this, you'd think it's kind of the bonfire of planning is what's really bothering the industry. I think many of us in the industry, in boroughs and local authorities that are actually keen to see housing happen, that's not actually the problem we're facing. Our planners are churning out plenty of planning decisions, and we've got a pipeline of sites ready to go. What is causing profound angst at the moment is the building safety regulator, the gateway process, and the failure for that to function effectively. It's fundamentally not working right now. Everyone knows that. And I guess there's a question for us all is, does government recognise that enough? And are they doing enough to see that addressed fast enough? And that brings me on to kind of the fourth point I was kind of pondering about. It's kind of like, okay, so if we address the issue around kind of money to housing associations, money to affordable housing, if we manage to fix the economy, get that working again, one of the things that I don't think we're talking enough about at the moment is the infrastructure that underpins housing delivery, be that blue infrastructure, be that energy infrastructure, be that green infrastructure, be that transport infrastructure. At the moment, I think we're looking too much for quick fixes. We're not thinking hard enough about all the ingredients that come together to see a successful pipeline of housing and places come forward over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Unfortunately, sort of stuff we do for a living, you don't just flick a switch and it happens. You've got to plan well for it and work towards it in a certain and confident environment. Those conditions don't particularly exist at the moment.
Yeah. Plenty in there to get our teeth into, Peter. And of course, the London Growth Plan was launched this week, and that addresses or seeks to address a number of those issues, particularly around the infrastructure point at the end. Okay, so let's see what we pick up on. Nicola, what would you like to sort of have a grapple with in that long list?
Yeah, I suppose picking up on Peter's point about the other infrastructure that needs to happen to grow the economy. I think we're talking about the 1.5 million homes, but you can't possibly think about homes in isolation because people do a lot more things than live in their homes. So it's how do we think about, and if you think about how do we attract big employers to the capital, how do we attract investors, it is homes, but it's also leisure, it's culture, it's green space, it's infrastructure, it's critically access to incredible talent. And the growth plan identified sort of inclusive talent opportunities as being really important. So I think it's like, how do we think of this, and leisure and culture and having an amazing food offer? So how do we think about it in the whole? Let's not go down that path, I think, of just getting obsessed with housing numbers. I mean, we don't talk about them as units anymore, that's progress, but let's not just think about homes in the round, because linked to the affordability issue, obviously in London, is massive. To fix that, you either need to pump money in to get more homes built to make them affordable, or people need to have good jobs. And then to get good jobs, you need to be investing in skills. You also need to be thinking about health. And I think that's really critical. We need to be, I think post-COVID, there's a huge kind of health crisis on the horizon. There's a lot of people that are going to be out of work because they can't access health services. So I think that link between housing, health and productivity is incredibly important. And I'd want to see a kind of a broader conversation around that.
Yeah, Peter, are you having that broad conversation?
Yeah, so I think along with Nicola and others, I was at the launch of the London Growth Plan yesterday morning, bright and early. And to be fair, I think what I took away from that session was that there was a recognition that housing and a focus on the economy more broadly go hand in hand as part of a series of interrelated things that we've got to do. I was reflecting on the session yesterday. I think what they definitely got right yesterday was the kind of the mood and tone was really, really positive. And we need a bit of that in our lives right now, don't we? We need government and the actors of government, like many of the people on this call and those in the industry, to start thinking our way into a more positive future, thinking about what are the strengths and assets that we've got, what are the things we can work with. So, for example, it was nice to see a bit of a shift, I have to say, in terms of how we talk about the economy. There had been a focus for quite some time on inclusive growth, almost alone, the inclusive element. It was this idea that we had this huge cake or a pint of milk with a big chunk of cream at the top of it, and it was mostly about how do we redistribute that cream part of it. I think we've now realized that metaphorical pint of milk is kind of not full, and we have to get back into the business of growing the economy again. So that focus on things like, where are the key sectors and strengths of London? Where is it that we've got a particular advantage? How do we lean into those areas that are going to help us grow? And where I think the housing part of it came into, it was interesting. It was partially about kind of contributing to productivity, but it was also that recognizing if you're going to grow an economy, if you're going to have more people living in the city, you've got to have the housing that doesn't kind of detract from that offer. It's almost avoiding a negative, but we in the industry, of course, see it as a positive. It is, of course, something that could create its own kind of economic activity around it and support those wider growth sectors. So everything working hand in glove together, you get to a point whereby it becomes self-sustaining after time.
Yeah, and it's pushing towards that idea of housing as infrastructure, I guess, isn't it? That we want to get to, so that Treasury starts looking at it in a slightly different way, and perhaps that unlocks some delivery. Just picking up on that, then I thought on the growth plan, there was positive news for Hounslow in there, particularly in the treatment of London's economy as polycentric. Very specifically, it's like a galaxy, not a star. Yeah, so it's not just about the central business district; it's about the outer boroughs as well, and what you have to offer, which seems like it's good news. There's going to be some focus for you, but I thought. On the flip side, this picking up on your mention of positivity, Peter. I thought that with our 1.5 million homes target, the best thing about that whole piece is that it's that sort of moonshot target, right? It gets everybody aiming in the same direction, irrespective of where we actually get that number. Everybody's aiming towards it, and that unlocks all sorts of collaborations and new ways of thinking that aren't possible otherwise. And that's that kind of mission approach to the project, isn't it? And I thought, looking through the section of the growth plan that was titled Building Housing and Infrastructure, this was pointed out. It is a 1-year ambition, right? So in 1 year, what are we going to do? We are going to work to reduce the time taken for planning applications. And I thought that it was pointed out to me by a good friend, David Taylor, who edits NLQ magazine, and I thought he was absolutely right. That lacks ambition. That isn't mission type thinking. It's a little bit limp. So it's positive, and I see that there are positives there. But what did you think, Peter? I mean, were there missed opportunities?
Well, look, I think one of the things. Funny enough, I was at another session yesterday, and I think one of the things that's coming out repeatedly at the moment is the need for clarity about what are the kinds of rules of the game that we're playing to here at the moment. And if I had a criticism of where government's at thus far on this agenda, it's the failure to bring clarity to key elements around what we're going to be working with. What is the next chapter of the affordable housing programme going to look like? How are housing revenue accounts and housing associations going to be made liquid again to allow them to play their role in this world that they need to play? Where is the funding streams that are going to put the infrastructure in place that unlocks a scale of ambition that equates to 1.5 million? All of that has been kicked down. The can has been kicked down the road persistently to the spring statement, which we await with great interest. And the focus has been on the failure of planning, as opposed to broader regulatory constraints. And I think that's perhaps part of the challenge of writing a London growth plan right here, right now, is that minus all of those bits of clarity, what is it that London alone can do? And so we're all waiting with bated breath to see what the package of measures will be that stimulates a set of activity that gets us towards 1.5 million. Now, there are things that have been kind of hinted at over and over and over again. You mentioned it. Could government look at finally treating social and affordable housing as public infrastructure? What would the effect of that be? You would take it away from things like the housing revenue account, whereby you're basically asking the tenants, some of the poorest people in society, from their rent to cover much of the cost of delivering new affordable housing. It's not a model that was designed to work in this way. So we need to separate that out and do it quite differently. Someone, not me, yesterday at a session I was at, a Future of London session as it happens, suggested, what if we simply rebase HRAs and housing associations, just accept we are where we are, rebase it, and let people move forward. Now, there's huge implications of everything I'm saying here, but Treasury in particular needs to start thinking a hell of a lot more boldly, because the current set of ingredients that we're playing with don't equate to an ability for us to unlock even the affordable housing element of it. And without that confidence that government's going to invest alongside them, I would wager that a lot of private developers are going to continue to get ready for stuff that might happen, but are we going to see the uptick that we all aspire to see happening? That's not clear yet. And I think a bit more welly from government in terms of finances, and failing welly, a bit of clarity as to what we're actually working with. And then we're all pretty good at trying to work our way through all of that and do the best we can given the ingredients we've got to play with.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, not to be too critical, we're grateful for the positivity, right, after all of these years.
Honestly,
Dominic, Dominic, Tom, you've been waiting very patiently. Feel free to pick up on anything that we've been talking about so far, or if there are any other sort of items in Peter's in tray that you'd like to have a grasp at. Dominic, do you want to go first?
I think just around the kind of heading of viability, there's the idea of, my area of interest, sustainability. There's a huge amount of work going on in the background, which is sort of voluntary, I would say, like with the net zero carbon building standard coming on, and all these aspects. The future home standard is hovering around in the background. So it's just like, as well as delivering these homes, we just need to have a focus on the sort of good design, high quality, the skills that are needed to deliver these homes in terms of sustainability. How do we build these homes at a high sustainable level? So there's just really from the on the ground, there's a lot of work going on in the background, as well as talking about these headline figures, which is to do with the actual the targets, the self-imposed targets. A lot of us are working to try and to address climate change, but that again is another challenge in terms of viability. And I just think that is comes with a lot of opportunity as well. I mean, there's one of the things we've noticed at GSK is with the emergence of the circular economy as a massive opportunity in London, which is
so this is
all the time.
Dominic, just to interrupt, this is the GSK site in Brentford, so GlaxoSmithKline, the site that Hadley owns, that is redeveloping in Hounslow. Yeah.
And we're looking to redevelop the site and keep part of the existing building and introduce some new density to the site. But yeah, the circular economy has played a central role to that. So it's just there's challenges, but there's also opportunities as part of this sort of emerging economy, I would say, which complements should complement the sort of delivery of this 1.5 million homes.
So the call on climate change this week has been for cultural change. Yeah. So there's only so far that that government and industry can push things, and actually we need to change our behaviours as individuals, as residents, as members of society, in order to really effect the next level of change. So are you saying that that's playing through in your consultation with local people in Brentford? Are they talking about the circular economy?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, it's very much coming to the fore in terms of the public consultation that we've done and the co-design workshops that we've done. Everyone's very interested in the existing building and how we can reuse that. So that's very central to what we've been doing.
And are you noticing that, Peter, across the borough? Is this something that plays out in most developments, in some developments?
I think things have come on an awful lot, haven't they, in terms of people's awareness of what the green economy might be about, people's kind of understanding of concepts like, net zero or reducing kind of carbon. People have become a lot more green in their thinking, and that's true right across kind of your regular kind of members of the public, right through to a lot of community groups that are very active in various different forms of community development, or active in their neighborhoods, who kind of have a green kind of strand running through a lot of what they do. Some more obvious, some perhaps more just kind of becoming gradually embedded in what they do for a living. We as a borough kind of pride ourselves on trying to kind of be slightly ahead of the curve on all things green. And we've been doing a lot of really interesting work with our communities to build kind of local capacity. Heston and the Loop is a really nice example of a circular economy initiative. We've piloted a net zero neighborhood approach. So as a borough, we're trying to kind of learn ourselves as a local authority, but also to help build capacity with our voluntary community sector and with our community. So yeah, I think we're seeing it right across the piece. People's expectations have changed fundamentally in terms of what they expect to see coming forward from developments and what sort of future they want for their communities.
And Nicola, is this something very specific to Hounslow because of the work that they're doing, because they're pioneering and pushing forward, or is this something happening across London?
No, so this is an amazing opportunity to plug a guide that we launched only this week called Resilient Cities, A Fair Response to Climate Change. So this was a result of our members being concerned about if they're going to invest in climate resilience measures, how are they going to make sure that the most vulnerable in their boroughs benefits. So we did a 10-month programme. The guide is available on the Future of London website, but a fundamental tenet of that was about the importance of engaging communities. And there is, because as an industry we can be quite technical about climate resilience, and we need to do more to make it much more accessible to people, because it does impact everyone's, and we need to make it relevant to how it affects everyone's kind of day-to-day lives. But there is so much energy that we found through our research from citizens groups, community groups, to actually take the lead, or at least be an equal partner in figuring out what the solutions at a very hyper local level are. So Hounslow is doing an amazing job, Camden's doing a fantastic job, and the other boroughs are available. But yeah, there is a lot of energy if you can just tap into that, making it relevant to everyone's day-to-day lives, and seeing as it not as sort of bashing everyone over the head, everyone's going to have to abandon their cars. Actually, this is about reducing people's energy bills. It's about creating much nicer places for people to walk and cycle. You know, it's a really positive story, and I think we just need to kind of change the narrative around that. But it's certainly something that there is a great sort of, as I say, energy within communities to actually take a lead on this as a topic. And I think that's the challenge for Dominic, is to, you know, in a retrofit versus demolition redevelopment conversation, it's also about thinking about value and what sort of long-term value we put on buildings. And it's not just the kind of engineering solution of what's the best option. It's also about what that value of that building that brings to the local people, both in the short term and the long term, and all the health benefits and everything else that goes with it, not just the kind of science and the kind of data.
It's the quality, isn't it? The quality of the housing is fundamental, and that's what affects people's lives. So that's what's important.
Yeah, we're going to pick up on that in a second, in the second half of this discussion, and it's really appropriate for Hadley in particular, given what I've seen of the way you're going about that scheme at GSK. So yeah, there's a thread for us to gather. But first, Tom, you've not yet had a chance to sift through Peter's in tray and see what grabbed your attention. Do you want to pick up on anything that we've been talking about, or find a new item?
Yeah, just sort of touch quickly on the point Peter made about BSR and the sort of gateway approvals, and just to give an example of a project that we'll support a client on 114 new affordable homes. It went in for July last year, still waiting to come out the other side, and that's a direct delay to delivery of new homes. And that story, I think, speaking to developers and developing housing associations and local authorities, is replicated so many times across across the country. So a real kind of practical issue that it feels like there's got to be a solution to that. That's not that difficult to achieve. More widely, just picking up, I think the point Peter making on the kind of mood and the tone. I think that's really important. I'd absolutely agree with the statement. Yeah, housing is infrastructure, and if we start referring to it as infrastructure, then we kind of stop referring to grant subsidy and we refer more to investment. I think the kind of tone of a conversation really changes. And then if we're talking about, for example, we don't talk about, we're giving the NHS grants or subsidies. We could talk about investing in the NHS. And really, as Nicola made the point, there are such clear health benefits that come from good housing that we've got to kind of use that language. And it's not just health, educational benefits as well. I can't sort of do one of these without coming back to that shocking statistic about 1 in 21 children in London is in temporary accommodation. So it's a real kind of emergency. And then linked to that, I think the point you're making about the kind of the ambition, Toby, and is there sufficient ambition in a time of national emergency, which I'd say that this temporary accommodation situation is one. If we reflect back to times such as COVID and how quickly did Nightingale Hospital spring up, it feels like we need a similar level of urgency to address this temporary accommodation crisis. And there are an example of perhaps how this might be improved. There are modular pod solutions, which massive improvement from people being stuck in substandard bed and breakfast and other temporary accommodation. But they take forever to get through the planning system as well, often. And it feels like there's got to be, again, a solution there to really unlock some temporary accommodation solutions through technologies and pod systems that are out there already. So that's an area. I think if we can kind of shift that tone to investment rather than subsidy, that goes a long way to unlocking and kind of bringing people on board with the need for the 1.5 million.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. A couple of just points to throw in, and then I'll hand it over to Peter. One, on that emergency, it does feel like COVID happened really quickly, and as a result, everybody responded really quickly and in a kind of concerted effort. It felt like we were crossing the silos and everybody had the same ambitions. Whereas temporary accommodation feels like it's crept up on us. And because we've been talking about it so long and we've been aware of it for so long, it feels like somehow it's being treated as less an emergency. And as a result, we're not giving it the same kind of concerted effort that we might if it had happened really suddenly. I don't know. That's just a thought. And then on the pods, Waits had a launch this week of a system and a discussion that they've had working with Centrepoint in London and with the Deputy Mayor Tom Copley on creating a permitted development right for planning for a lease that would last less than 2.5 years, I think they said, for someone to take on a single room pod that was below London space standards, so 22 square meters. And that Centrepoint were using that as a way of getting young people, homeless people, off the streets and into accommodation, and therefore onto the job ladder and getting their lives in order. And they were saying, I think they said that their average turnaround was about 9 months. So within 9 months, a young person had moved on into a more permanent residential situation. So it was a sort of successful model, and they're hoping to get that kind of that change to planning through so that they can do more of that. Peter, all of that on the table before you, and the chance to move the conversation on to how you make that decision, how you balance that decision between retrofit and redevelopment. Pick up where you will.
Yeah, so I think on temporary accommodation, we in Hounslow have, this isn't to brag, because genuinely this is just a kind of a reflection of a moment in time that makes the point I'm about to make. So we have a declining level of temporary accommodation in Hounslow. I think we're the only local authority in the country at the moment, or certainly we were at one point in the not too distant past. We shouldn't get too excited about that stat. There's nothing specifically miraculous that Hounslow is doing, of course, managing lists well, all that sort of stuff. We just had a period of good supply in terms of council homes and affordable housing coming in, which has allowed us to manage our temporary accommodation pressures in the way that in an ideal world we'd all be managing them, if you see what I mean. So what's my point? My point is it's all about supply, fundamentally speaking. And I had a good conversation with some of our kind of political masters who made a very good point in this space, which was it's very difficult to feel like you want to create a new tenure type in responding to temporary accommodation challenges, because there's much discussion in this space. I think addressing rough sleeping and that end of the kind of the work that we do feels like there are some potential quite innovative different solutions there. But when we're thinking about providing kind of homes to address need, fundamentally this is all about just getting supply back up to where it ought to be at, and there's a slight risk, in my personal opinion, of getting distracted with temporary accommodations needing a separate or different response to it. We have had discussions internally about could we do something novel as a very literally to deal with temporary accommodation, where temporary means genuinely temporary. Is there a slightly different product that you might bring to the fore to deal with households in transition? But in the majority of boroughs, unfortunately, temporary accommodation has become something that people are in for a very long period of time. So it's not really the answer to the temporary accommodation challenge problem. In terms of then thinking about retrofit versus new build, I think the world, again, to my earlier point, has moved on so much now that not only do people kind of look at something like, as we're talking about the GSK building, they see a new building, people aren't comfortable with the basic idea that you just kind of level it and start again. And then, of course, you've got planning policy, which doesn't allow you to do that anymore. We are all being encouraged to think really creatively about how we reuse what's already there in really imaginative ways. And developers and architects and all the other parties involved in getting schemes to come forward have started to get seriously creative about reuse of buildings. And I think one of the really interesting points for me is then how one communicates all of that. And Dominic, much better place to say, but from a GSK perspective, but on the outside, it may look very different. And to a random member of the community nearby, they may feel like all has been gotten rid of and it's a completely fresh start. So how we engage our communities in that process of how we're using existing structures, how we're thinking in a circular economy way about some of the materials that may not be needed any longer, all that world of stuff raises some really interesting questions about how we engage and include and involve residents and community groups in the process of development as part of the work we do on sites like this.
And that's a question for you, Dominic, that precise question. I mean, with just to set this in slightly, so GSK building, it's not even old, right? It's 20 odd years old.
It's just over 20 years old, yeah. So
yeah, it's a relatively new building and it's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning, but it's clearly not a residential building.
It's not a residential building, and I think this is one of the challenges around retrofit. I think someone did a study into Manhattan, for example, and they did a study of all the buildings in Manhattan. I think only 10 to 15% of them were suitable for residential conversion. This was in response to the sort of post-COVID world, different ways of working, technology changes. So yeah, something like GSK, you look at it in the immediate kind of response is, well, we could get rid of all of it, really. It would make life a lot simpler. Just clear the site. And
there must be moments when you're sort of pulling your hair out saying, why can't we just knock it down?
New housing up, which is a very high quality, high performance housing. And then but the conversation has changed, like as Peter has suggested, and that's like throughout society, even websites like Vinted, everyone's aware of this sort of circular economy. There's a different attitude from younger generations about what they want to see done with the built environment. And so yeah, it then becomes a matter of how you do it. It's quite complex. What we've done is undertaken a very extensive research piece up front, which we wouldn't normally do with a site, which is looking at the existing building. We've gone out to the community and talked to them about what they'd like to see, what they think of the existing building through co-design and through community engagement workshops. And we've also reached out across the industry. One of the really interesting pieces is, even though it's a relatively new building and the technical CAD has been around for quite a while, the available information for the existing building is not always readily available. So you have to sort of reach out to industry, and there's a kind of new way of working, which is more to do with like openness and cooperation, which is really good. I mean, a lot of the time historically people would have worked in silos and not shared information, being very protective about information and but we've found that there is a new attitude to that. So yeah, we're very much looking to reuse parts of the building and remodel it and reshape it in response to all the consultation that we've been through with Hounslow and with the local community. We've done some extensive, I have got a slide here, I don't know if I just got to.
Yeah, it'd be great. Show a picture of it, because it is a striking building. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the site here on the Great West Road on the Golden Mile. So, and it's, as you can see, it's a very high quality building as well. The company spent a lot of money designing and building and delivering this building, but it's very much a kind of campus style building, so it's quite outdated these days. But the research we've had to look at this structure and look at what is the most what is the best retention strategy. We need to balance site capacity, placemaking, quality of homes with the embodied carbon savings. So this is the initial analysis of the embodied carbon, looking at the substructure. The majority of the carbon was in the substructure in the basement, so we can definitely try and keep that and use as much of that as possible. So the team itself was extensive, and the research has been significant. And there's also a viability challenge about, is it actually financially viable to do this? There's a lot of insurance issues around reusing buildings. Can the components be reused? If they can't be, can we get them into the circular economy? And this is sort of just a kind of snapshot of a moment in time in terms of the sort of sustainability strategy and the site. And these are the elements that we're kind of remodeling and trying to keep. So, there's a significant amount of carbon in these buildings. But again, it's about balancing it with placemaking, with creating new, healthy environments, regenerative environments, as well as saving the embodied carbon. So you can't just get obsessed about the embodied carbon. You need to sort of think more broadly and respond to the community's requirement, the wider community's requirements, and of course Hounslow's.
So this is, you make the decision at the beginning that this is what you're going to do, and then you deploy all the resources to understand what it means and how it's going to impact the scheme. But you've got to stay true to that kind of original mission.
Yeah, we do, and you have to kind of, you have to keep focused on that and keep your nerve, really, because there are some quite sort of various points. There's some quite shocking financial implications to keeping an existing building. So there's obviously a saving in one respect, but it's that. And also, let's not forget all the potential for new buildings like commercial activity, new infrastructure, energy centres, low carbon energy centres, and new high quality homes. That those have their own sustainability requirements. So there's two things going on. There's the reuse, retrofit, and the new build.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Tom. On that issue of the cost of doing this, you had some points to make about a scheme in Cambridge that you were involved in that kind of upset, because the traditional view is you've got a long-term saving if you look at making a building more sustainable, but you've got a short-term impact in the cost, right?
Yeah, and I think I'd agree with the point that Peter and Dominic have both made, that the starting point is no longer to assume we're just going to level it. However, that doesn't mean that is sometimes not to the conclusion that actually in certain circumstances it is still right to start again. And I think in answering this sort of question, should you redevelop or retrofit, I think it very much depends on your organisation's position and aims. So it might be, compliance might be a factor. Do you need to get buildings up to BPC levels? Are you looking for, is that your priority? Are you looking to increase housing numbers? And again, that might lead you down a sort of different direction as well. Is a financial return your kind of key driver behind this? So I think in answering that question, it's obviously very site specific, but it's also very organisation specific as to what your organisational aims are. The site we worked on with Cambridge City Council, this was a old leaky estate. And we went through this sort of decision making process and looked at a whole range of options, from just purely doing the kind of bare essential repairs all the way through to knock down, redevelop. And the surprising factor for me in this, even when measured on a sort of sustainability for a sustainability lens, was that over the long term, actually in this scenario, new build, knock down and new build was the right route from a absolute carbon perspective over 30 years. So it doesn't say that won't hold true for a lot of buildings, but in this case it was true. So while the assumption can't be we're absolutely going to level it, equally I don't think the assumption should always be we're going to retain it, because that's not always the right response either.
Because the goal has to be to reduce the carbon impact, not to just, in principle, retain buildings.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
And that's your operational savings over that 30-year period sort of outweigh the maintenance of the existing fabric.
Exactly, yeah, because certain buildings, and also there's only so much you can do with certain buildings. You can't, if you're keeping a building, you can't reorientate the building, and that that in itself is a factor. So for me, this was a really kind of interesting exercise we went through with say Cambridge City Council, and that kind of led us to the conclusion that in this case redevelopment was right.
Okay, so thanks for that, Tom. So Nicola, in your research and the work that you've done, Future of London, on this subject, are you finding a kind of balance between redevelop and retrofit as a solution, or is the pendulum swinging one way or another? What are your findings?
So the project that we did was looking at it was driven from the concern that lots of community assets, that local authorities were going to sell off a lot of community assets, and it was about how do we value our community assets, and how are people thinking about what those assets give to the community. So less of a kind of retrofit redevelopment issue, but some of the issues are very similar, because in those conversations there were things like, how do we make retrofit or more efficient? So things like building a supply chain, a local supply chain or a London-wide supply chain came up quite a lot. There was a lot of talk about how to get schemes, if you're doing a retrofit scheme through the planning system, how do you make the decision as to whether you've retrofit or demolishing? How have you come to that conclusion, and making data and information accessible to planners? So at the time, the City of London had just created a retrofit guidance, which was really setting out what they need to know as planners, and asking developers to be quite transparent about how they've made those decisions on what their final kind of option was. There was something about how do we incentivize retrofit, which was about having planning flexibility and clarity, about fiscal incentives, and how can we improve our kind of design and technical solutions, and what's the role of that. And then the last one, and we talked about value as well, and how you actually tell the story about retrofit, and that kind of wider economic health, placemaking, social value input, but also about the importance of demonstrating to residents the value of retrofit. So really talking about telling the story, getting them engaged, as Dominic was saying, getting people involved in having those conversations about, these are the different options, what do you think? Being quite honest with people, obviously not using overly technical language, but also not treating people like idiots. And that sort of storytelling is really powerful. And as Dominic was saying, so many people are now talking in lots of other ways in parts of their life about recycling, upcycling, that I think it is something that's a great opportunity then talk about that in the context of a building. I just think is really exciting. So you've got some really good examples, like the Beacon Design Code and Retrofit Guide was co-written by the council and the local community. So there's some really good practice examples of that.
And I noticed in that example, Nicola, I was quite interested by the fact that was a response partly to overwhelming pressure on the planning system, to get residents involved, just because, it's too much for the council to do alone. Peter, any threads in that you want to sort of pick up as moving towards a last words, really? And you're on mute.
No, sorry, it was just.
But you knew that
after all this time. I think. Almost looping back to where I started with this, the world has changed and we are responding to that. People's expectations, frankly, also business community expectations. Developers have changed. Developers don't have the same mindset to this that they had some time ago. Costs have changed. The way that people think about this has changed. And I think we're learning probably that in doing things differently, there are opportunities for new types of conversations with residents and communities that help engage them in the built fabric quite a bit more and in a very different way. And look, we've gone through a period where development has been probably quite tricky in terms of local political perception. I feel like the tide is turning a bit. I feel like the top level national argument around the need to secure more homes, the need for development to happen, the need for growth to happen, I feel like that argument has broadly been won. But it would be a huge mistake for us as an industry to not learn some of the lessons that we've learned in terms of the need to engage well, bring people on board, communicate and include as part of a development process to make development acceptable, and not more than that, genuinely welcome in our communities. And I think that's the opportunity. And I think, good developers like Hadley on the call, and the way that they've engaged in our community, with our communities in Hounslow, are really, really showing us all how we can have better conversations and make development genuinely welcome again.
Fantastic, Peter. Thank you very much indeed. So Nicola, Tom, Dominic, if there are any links or files, PDFs or whatever that you can put in the chat to share with viewers, I'm sure they'd be grateful. But in the meantime, we have to kind of close the session. I always find with these things, we tease out many more threads than we actually end up dealing with. But that's part of the role of a lunchtime chat. So hopefully all the viewers have had time to munch through their sandwiches or finish their bowls of soup while we've been nattering away, and we've kept them amused and stimulated and interested. But now it's time for you to go for your lunch, Peter, Nicola, Tom and Dominic. So warmest thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us today. And please join me in thanking our speakers. Thank you to Peter O'Brien from the London Borough of Hounslow. Thank you to Nicola Mathers from Future of London. And thank you to Dominic Spray and of Hadley Property Group, and Tom Conlon from Loft, both for your contributions to the conversation, but also for your sponsorship, which has made the webinar possible, and the whole season, Hounslow season of videos, which I urge viewers to find on YouTube under 1.5 million new homes, particularly for Tom's contribution on consultation and engagement and when it's okay to say no. We're going to be back on Friday on the 28th of March with Be First and Barking and Dagenham. So watch out for video interviews from Barking and Dagenham, which we start publishing next week. But in the meantime, thanks again to the London Borough of Hounslow for your contribution to 1.5 million new homes. Thank you very much.